Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is my review of the last episode of Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, called Coming Home. And relatively to the other episodes in this season, this one wasn't so bad, but for a season final, it was kind of disappointing. There was not really any new information, no real twists, a lot of empty mystery boxes. No real surprises except for some fake outs, some fake deaths which didn't end up to be deaths, and so that's kind of a cheap, lazy way to create drama and emotions and then immediately push the reset button because they don't really want to change anything with the characters and all of that, and so they didn't want to sacrifice some characters but they pretended to, and so there was not really any big twists, no real revelations, no real satisfactory resolution. It was very predictable, very cliche, very by the book, not any kind of twist, and I think they could have added some twist to it, and I will say my ideas later. And also, the very end of the episode felt really disappointing. It feels as if they weren't sure if they're going to get another season, and so that's why they had to wrap everything up so nicely, and I think that was a missed opportunity because they seem to have been setting up something for the next season and then never did it, and so it remains as just an unresolved mystery box with no answer. Like a few episodes ago, that guy with the glasses, Kovic, was saying that he cannot come with them on this mission because he has something even more urgent to deal with. And when they asked him what it is, he said he cannot say, it's something super important. And so I was expecting that in the last episode we're going to find out what that is, something interesting, something even bigger than the current storyline, so maybe a setup for the next season or something like that, but nope, nothing was revealed at all. He simply never appeared again, and so we don't know what the hell he was talking about. I guess they might reveal it in the next season, but the fact that we don't even get any kind of clue, any hint about it, even in the last episode, means the writers themselves don't really know. So they didn't make it up yet, and so they simply set it up as an empty mystery box with no real explanation, and I hate that. And also in the very first episode of the season, they revealed that new starship that is able to explore much farther than any other ship before it and so on. So I expected that in the last episode that starship will arrive suddenly to help out, or Kovic and Mr. No Response will reveal some bigger threat they found, something for the next season, but no, we got absolutely nothing. And also Kovic was saying something about a 3-hour tour outside the galaxy, so that implied that Discovery will get stuck and it will take them a while to get back, which is not a bad idea for the show. I said that, I think, from a few seasons ago, that they should completely ditch the Spore drive and simply get stuck somewhere else in some distant corner of space. And also I expected them to somehow finally explain that short trek Calypso. I suggested multiple times how they can easily do it, and yet they don't seem to bother, so it seems as if they totally forgot about that one. And the funny part is that in the middle of this episode they do lose the Spore drive. They say that to get outside of that bubble that they get stuck in by the 10th sea, they have to use the Spore drive, which is not working in this area of space, but they can still spin the ship using it and then use its energy to blast their way out of the bubble. And by doing that they fry their Spore drive, and they specifically say that they cannot fix it without going to space dock. And so they actually show us the Spore cube exploding, and so I was really glad to see it because that's something I was suggesting the show should do years ago, and so I was glad to see it. So I thought they will for sure get stuck somewhere out in far space in the end of the season, maybe leading to an explanation for that short trek Calypso, or to the new season which will be like Voyager, of them trying to get home. They specifically say it will take them decades to get back home without the Spore drive, but by the end of the episode the 10th sea just teleport them back with no problems. So the whole losing the Spore drive thing was just for what? For the sake of fake drama, just a fake feeling of suspense to make us think they will not go home, that they will get stuck in the end of the episode, and then they just magically get teleported back to Earth in the end, and so they will be back into the space dock, and so they will fix everything, so everything will come back to normal without any real changes. So that's as annoying as what they did with the so-called character deaths in this episode, because in a few scenes they apparently kill off a few characters only for those characters to come back unharmed a few scenes later. And so it just feels as if they're cheating us. They're just trying to manipulate us to make us think there are consequences to events when there are none. There are no real consequences, nothing really changed. And even the conclusion of the episode, that was the most annoying part. The way they basically solve all galactic problems in a second. I think the idea of season 3 wasn't really that bad as a kind of rebooting the Star Trek franchise into something fresher, and so saying that everything got destroyed, blew up in the galaxy, and so now it's a different kind of galaxy, and so it's not as bright as before. That's something I was kind of complaining about in my reviews of the previous season, but at least it was kind of a way to freshen things up and not having everything be too convenient and too happy, because that would be kind of, too easy if the Federation was perfect in the future. So by saying everything blew up and you have to rebuild it, that means you have less reinforcements, you have less help for your main crew and all of that, so it has some advantages. And even the idea that Earth left the Federation, as silly as it seemed in the universe of Star Trek, at least it does kind of shake things up, and it kind of makes the Federation not just all about Earth, humanity is not in the center of it. There was some potential with that. They could have played with that more. So I don't necessarily hate that idea, even though I do remember I complained about it when I first saw it, because it was kind of done over the top. Like humans were shown to be almost like evil. They were xenophobes. They had a space wall around Earth. They wouldn't even help humans in their own solar system, and apparently all other colonies except for Titan all got destroyed, because we have no mention of any other one except I think the moon colony. And so it seemed kind of silly the way they did it, but the overall idea that Earth left the Federation and is not a part of it anymore, that's an idea they could have played with. So the fact that they simply resolve it immediately, so suddenly Earth rejoins the Federation as if nothing ever happened, it all felt so rushed, and so I really feel as if they were afraid they will not get another season, and that's why they had to wrap everything completely. And I thought it was a missed opportunity because of the way they seem to be setting things up. So I thought the ending of the episode was extremely weak and unsatisfying, but the beginning of the episode wasn't that bad. It starts up with a lot of action scenes of Starfleet trying to evacuate people from Earth, and we see Starfleet headquarters itself flying like a starship at warp speed toward Earth, which was kind of neat. I don't actually mind that idea. It actually would make sense that it is able to move at warp. I guess that's how Starfleet headquarters was able to keep hidden, not just relying on that cloaking field that we saw in the previous season, but they actually said that its location is secret. You need some special algorithm to find Starfleet headquarters, so I guess they change their location once in a while. We see the Admiral in action, and then we see Tilly again, that the cadets she's commanding are exactly the same cadets we saw in that episode that she was with them stuck on that planet. Those are exactly the same cadets. So are those the only cadets in Starfleet Academy, the same ones we saw before? That was a little bit silly. So anyway, they're trying to evacuate Earth, and they say they're only able to save like 500,000 people and all of that, which seems kind of silly, because they show us like thousands of starships. So why can they only evacuate 500,000 people and not millions of people? And then the Admiral stays behind on that starbase, willing to sacrifice himself to let all the other ships escape, and then Tilly decides to stay with him. And then a scene later, they're not even doing anything. They're just sitting around and start drinking and talking. And so I think, wait, if you're not actually doing anything, so why did you stay there for? So what was the point of staying? And then the Admiral asks her how much longer they have, and she says 2 hours, and then they kind of look at each other and think how to pass the time. And maybe it's just me, but I have kind of a dirty mind, and so I immediately start thinking about the kind of parodies I can make with that scene. And I suddenly remembered that movie Male Gigolo, in which that guy who plays the Admiral played a male whore in that movie, so I will probably do some edit with that. So anyway, the action scenes were not that bad. We see a bunch of asteroids hitting Earth's shields, and we even see a few of them pass through the shield and hitting the surface, apparently killing millions of people. And what annoyed me, in the end of the episode, after 10C cancelled their DMA and all of that, we saw all those asteroids flying back out into space. And that makes absolutely no sense, because if those asteroids were already flying toward Earth at high speed and already caught in Earth's gravity, there's no way that cancelling the DMA will magically pull all those asteroids back from where they came from. It makes no sense. And if somehow someone used the reverse gravity to do it, then wouldn't that cause other problems as well? Wouldn't the atmosphere of Earth also get pulled out or something? I guess 10C are so advanced, they are able to magically do it and just pull the asteroids away without harming anything else. I guess I could come up with excuses like that. Why not simply show that the asteroids stop coming? They will handle the ones that remain, but new ones will stop coming because the DMA is no longer pushing it or something. So why do it in a silly way of showing all the asteroids which were about to hit suddenly stop and fly out into space? It makes absolutely no sense physically. So stuff like that really annoys me, really takes me out of it. And speaking of the 10C, finally we get to see them in this episode. when Discovery actually flies into their planet and lands somewhere on their planet, which is supposed to be a gas giant, so shouldn't the gravity there be immense? But I guess 10C are so advanced, they're able to shield them from the gravity. I guess I'm okay with things like that not being explained, because it's easy to explain it in my own head canon. So if they're so advanced, they would be able to create artificial conditions for them and so on. So it doesn't need to be explained to us. So I'm fine with it. They did show a bubble forming around where they're standing, so I assume they created an atmosphere for them. So I assume they also created the right gravity conditions and so on. So I don't need it being spelled out to me. And finally we get to see them, and they just look like giant jellyfish creatures floating around. So nothing really that original. We saw jellyfish space creatures back from the first episode of TNG, so nothing really that amazing visually, but at least we finally get to see something, unlike in the previous episode when they were covered with fog and we couldn't see anything at all. So it is better than that. And the only interesting bit of information we find out about them is that apparently they have no individuals, they're all linked together, like a collective, almost like the Borg, but biological. So that is at least some kind of interesting science fiction idea, but also not really that original, because except for the Borg, we had the changelings in Deep Space Nine, who are all living together in the Great Link as one organism and only occasionally forming individuals to go on missions. And even before that, back in TNG, there was an episode called Allegiance, when Picard was replaced by aliens, and then in the end we see those aliens and they all look the same, and they say that they are all telepathically linked to each other. And that's why they don't understand concepts like the chain of command. That's why they wanted to study it, because for them it doesn't exist. They're all basically the same. They all look the same. They are all thinking the same way, because they're all telepathically linked at all times, which was a cool idea. And it's sad that we never got to see that species again. Picard scared them so much by capturing a few of them that they never showed their faces again to the Federation ever again. And in this episode, they're surprised to find out that this new species, the 10C, are all tied together somehow, like a collective, and don't understand what individuals are. And for a moment I was kind of hoping that maybe they will go for some kind of, Lovecraftian horror kind of stuff, even though it will go against what I myself was saying that Star Trek should be about. It should be about making peace with aliens, solving problems diplomatically, and not just killing the evil villains and ending it that way. So I like the fact that they went back to Star Trek's roots about solving problems with science and understanding and diplomacy and all those good things. On the other hand, part of me kind of wishes they would have gone suddenly toward the horror kind of way, that maybe the aliens will be revealed not to be so nice, or maybe out of misunderstanding, maybe they will want to fuse with one of the humans to better understand them, and maybe someone from the crew will be willing to do it, to sacrifice themselves for the sake of saving the galaxy, to make the 10C understand them by fusing with them, that will be the only way to truly communicate with them. So if they went for that, I wouldn't actually mind that, because as a science fiction idea, that would be kind of cool. I always liked movies like that about, people fusing with each other to create monsters and stuff like that, like in that movie Slither. And when they said that the 10C are calling them to join them, and after saying that they have no individuals, part of me was thinking, oh no, we're going to get some Lovecraftian horror kind of stuff. But then it never happened. The aliens turned out to be total sweethearts and total nice aliens, and they immediately agreed to everything, and so that was a little bit disappointing. It would have been more interesting if it was a little bit more difficult, and maybe at least someone from the crew should have died, someone should have fused themselves with the aliens or something like that. And it is funny how in the end Book talked with the aliens, and then he used his magic powers, his glowing forehead, to talk with the aliens. And so I immediately kind of facepalmed, thinking, why didn't they do it from the first place? Like, they spent a few episodes trying to figure out ways to communicate with the aliens, which I did like. That was one of the highlights of the season, as I said. But why didn't they bring a bunch of telepaths with them from the first place? Like, we know that in the Star Trek universe there are a whole bunch of different kinds of telepaths. And so why didn't they bring a bunch of them on the ship with them from the very beginning, and then tried it in the first time they met? Why not start with that? And then they can say, okay, their brain structures are so different that telepathy doesn't work on them. Because now it makes it silly. Like, the Vulcan president suddenly remembered that she's a Vulcan, and she's using a mind meld through the window with the aliens to get some information back and forth. So why didn't she do that from the first place? So in the end, it is Book who uses his glowing forehead to convince the aliens to stop using the DMA to destroy planets, and that's something I predicted from the start of the season, that in the end it will be Book who talks with the aliens and all of that. That was very predictable. I also think I predicted that Michael will cry really hard to the aliens to help convince them, and that also happens in this episode, of course, and so that's not really surprising. And so the aliens first get convinced not to use their technology in populated areas, but then Book says, no, you have to stop using it completely, because when you use it, it leaves behind some toxic voids and all of that, which we saw in the previous episode, but it didn't really seem that dangerous to the whole galaxy. Like, it seemed to be like in one spot and all of that. But I guess it's the environmental message and all of that. So they have to say, oh no, you shouldn't use certain ways to produce fuel, because if it damages the environment, it's still bad, even if it doesn't kill people directly. And then the aliens say, but we have to do it because we need it to sustain our space wall. They built that hyperfield. It's basically a giant wall in space to protect themselves from something. And then Book says, no, you must not use walls to separate yourself from the rest of the galaxy. We're all connected. It's a bad thing to be constructing walls around yourself. And so I'm immediately thinking, oh no, now they're pushing all the agendas and all of that. So all of that was a little bit silly. And then surprisingly, the aliens, they give up their space wall and the hyperfield disappears. And now they have only simple planets. And then the aliens create a wormhole for them to get back, and that's basically the end of the story. A few things I skipped over is Michael figures out who the traitor was. It was that general from Earth who decided to help Book and Tarka, and then Michael locks her in her quarters, but as always in the show, there are no consequences for doing bad things, and so just a few minutes later, they release her because she is going to help them do something, and so they need someone to pilot a suicide mission, and Michael first wants to send Lisa Lazy Eye to do it, and then the general volunteers to do it, and so I thought, oh, that's nice, she's going to redeem herself by sacrificing herself. I guess I'm okay with that. And then she flies toward the ship and collides with it, and we see Book and Tarka flying through glasses again, which we saw in the previous episode. I made fun of that, how often Book flies through glass on his ship in almost every episode, and so it happens again, and miraculously they all survive. So the general is being beamed back to the Discovery, and by the end of the episode she's totally scot-free. So betraying the Discovery, betraying the will of the whole Galactic Senate and all of that, and helping Tarka and sabotaging the peace talks in the middle, all of that goes unpunished because she had good intentions. She just wanted to save Earth. So just because she betrayed everyone and did something stupid, it's totally forgivable. I guess because she was willing to sacrifice herself, that makes it okay. But I think it would have been better if she simply died in that scene. That would have been a better conclusion, because she did something stupid and bad, but she kind of redeemed herself by sacrificing herself for the greater good, and so obviously she wouldn't be in prison because she's dead. But no, they beamed her back, she's totally okay, and she goes away scot-free and still friendly with everyone. So that was annoying, and the same with Book himself, because Book also betrayed everyone, stole the isolytic weapon, betrayed Michael, betrayed the Discovery, attacked the Discovery, detonated an isolytic weapon, sabotaged the peace talks, almost caused the galactic destruction and all of that, but he regrets it in the end. In the very last second, he was against Tarka, and so that makes it okay. Everything he did previously goes totally unpunished. By the end of the episode, he's with Michael as if nothing ever happened. So he doesn't even get to go to prison even for 1 year. No, they just gave him community service to go help some refugees, which is something he loves doing anyway. What kind of nonsense is that? Totally unpunished, same as that lady scientist in Star Trek Picard, who murdered someone in the previous season, and everyone totally forgot about it by the very next episode with no consequences. And the only real villain was apparently Tarka, because he was only doing everything he was doing for selfish reasons, because he wanted to get back together with that gay alien in some other dimension, which he thinks he beamed into, and so he wanted to beam into there as well. And then he tries to convince Book to join him because he says in the other dimension your family are still alive and all of that, and that also made me roll my eyes, because how the hell can he possibly know that in that parallel dimension there will be exactly the same people? If history there was radically different, I think he said earlier that the burn never happened in that reality, so that means at least a century of a completely different history. So why the hell would exactly the same people exist there as well? Makes absolutely no sense. How does he know that that alien is even there? Also, it's just wishful thinking. And in the very end, he does use his transporter, and he says maybe the impact with the power source will be enough to get there, and so we never actually get to see if he got there or not. So it's all left to our imagination. We don't get any resolution, any ending for that character. It's just basically up for us to decide whatever happened. So apparently he just died, and so no real resolution, no real revelation of whatever happened to that other alien. We will never know, I guess, and so that feels really kind of lazy. And then they make peace with the aliens, and the aliens teleport them immediately all the way back to Earth. And so all that talk about getting stuck outside the galaxy for decades, not having the Spore drive anymore, and all of that will be meaningless, because now they're back at Space Dock, they'll be able to fix everything, so no real consequences to anything. And then we get to see the president of Earth, and that's something I was joking a few episodes ago, that it's going to be another woman, because in the show every single leader of any planet has to be a woman, and that's one of the things that became kind of unintentional comedy in the show, all kinds of things that keep happening in every single episode, and that's one of them. And now we see the new president of Earth, and it's another woman of color, and that made me laugh out loud, because it's so predictable, because it became a pattern. It's now always like that, and so that makes it just laughable. I cannot help it. It's just funny to me. And in some ways I really like it, because at least it's entertaining to me, because it's so funny. So it's like unintentional comedy, so at least I'm entertained by it indirectly. And it's also kind of funny to me how in this distant future of the 32nd century, when medical technology is so advanced you should be able to cure anything in a second, how come people cannot fix their teeth to be straight? Like, again, it's not an insult toward any individual, and if this was a show set in today, I would say not a single word about it. But if the show is set in the distant future with highly advanced medical technology, things like that shouldn't exist, unless, and that's the only explanation I can come up with, is that it's actually a fashion choice. Like, people in this future, and these people from Earth, consider that arrangement of teeth to be beautiful. That's the only explanation I can come up with that will fit canon. Like the same explanation that, you know, how come Picard is still bald, how come there's no cure for baldness in the future. I always said it's not that there's no cure, it's simply that Picard wanted to look like that maybe in the future he wanted to look unique and different. Maybe being bald in the future is considered cool, maybe it's a fashion choice, and so on. So it's not really a big deal. I think teeth is a little bit more problematic, because, you know, having crooked teeth would actually cause you some health problems. The food will get stuck in there more and stuff like that, so why wouldn't you fix it in a second when you can, when it's totally free and easy and you can do it in 5 seconds in the future? So it makes no sense. It kind of takes me out of it for a moment, and the only way I can possibly explain it is by saying it's a fashion choice. And it's not just the president, the general also has teeth like that, and now we have the president, and we had Adira, who also lived on Earth, who also has gaps between her teeth, and we also had another officer in Starfleet headquarters who also has teeth like that. And so the only possible explanation is that it has to be a fashion choice in this future, otherwise it will make absolutely no sense, that they wouldn't fix it otherwise, and so it must be a fashion choice. That's the only explanation. And about obesity, that's also something I discussed in previous videos. I'm not going to repeat everything. I said before that in the far future with advanced medical technology it shouldn't really exist anymore, because it should be easily avoidable. But I guess the only explanation is that some people have a fetish for that kind of look, and some people really want to look like that, and so that's the only explanation, that it's a choice to look like that, and so some people simply like it. So I guess I'm fine with it, so I'm not going to discuss it again. But the thing that really annoyed me in that scene is that the line delivery was absolutely terrible. So I kept thinking, who the hell hired that actress who is so bad at saying her lines? And then I looked it up and I discovered that she's not an actress at all. She's actually a politician who wanted to make a cameo on Star Trek, and so they gave her the role of the president of Earth when she's a real life politician in the Democratic Party, and so that is absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, I had absolutely no idea who she was when I first saw it, so I was purely judging her only by what I saw on the screen, and especially her bad line delivery. That's what was annoying to me most of all. And then I looked her up and I saw that her last name was Abrams, and so at first I thought, wait, is she the wife of J.J. Abrams? Is that why they hired her? Because it's obviously not because of her great acting, so why the hell is she here? And then I found out she's an actual politician in the Democratic Party, and I have absolutely no knowledge of her, so I'm not judging her as that politician. I have no idea if I would be against her or for her. That's not the issue here. But the fact that they're basically picking political sides in today's politics, and trying to promote candidates by using the show as a platform, that is kind of strange and divisive, and wouldn't it be insulting to the other side and all of that? So, Trek was always kind of leaning in certain political directions, but it was never so on the nose, it was never so blatant, it was never so forced and artificial and silly. And then in the final shot, they zoom out of that space station and they show us all of Earth, and then we see that the only continent in Earth is Africa. And it seems to be huge, it's like covering the whole Earth. At first I didn't realize what the hell I'm looking at. At first I thought, is that Pangea? Did all Earth continents combine together into one huge continent? Like, it made no sense to look at it. And then I realized it's Africa, but on the side. Like, I guess they rotated it so it wouldn't be too obvious. So it's just Africa, that's the only continent. It takes up all of Earth. And so I keep thinking, why are they doing that? It's not that I'm against it, I just don't understand what are they trying to say with that. It's just so strange, it's so awkward in my opinion, I just don't get it, it's just funny. And I'm sure some people will now accuse me of racism because how dare I complain about the fact that they wanted to show this specific continent to make a point, and the fact that I'm complaining about it must mean I'm against making that point. So let me make it very clear. One of the reasons I used to love Star Trek is because of the fact that they showed all of humanity, that they showed that all of humanity is united in the future, that there are no more inequalities or racism or bigotry among humans, that humans united as one to go out into the stars and all of that. And I always liked that in Star Trek they were using the metric system, which, by the way, in my opinion, it's much more logical to use anyway. It's the one that is used in the majority of humanity. And whenever seeing Earth from space, I would simply expect to see the continents at random. Like, every time I would see some other part of Earth from space. Simply do it at random. They each time show something else. But the fact that this show is doing what was once done in a bigoted way, but they're doing it in reverse now. So isn't that also a problem? Like, if in the past, I'm not sure if that's even the case, but did they always show just America from space? Like, whenever you would zoom out of the Earth, it will only be America in the middle? Is that how it used to be? I'm not even sure if that was the case, but if so, and they now want to correct it by avoiding doing that again and instead doing the absolute opposite, so now they will only be showing Africa from space all the time. Will that be true equality? Will that be true unification of humanity? If they are now doing the exact same thing, only in reverse, now they will be only showing Africa from space. So this is also funny, even to do that, to even deal with that. Like, how bigoted is it to do it in any way? Like, just show it at random, just show whatever part of the planet that you happen to orbit. Why the need to force it? It's basically turning it political deliberately, and it just seems to be aimed to spite people, to rub it in their faces, to show, oh, here's Africa, you don't want to see Africa, right? So it's so nasty, not because I dislike Africa or African people, but because that's how they think. Like, it's because they think that we dislike it and they do it deliberately to try to spite us. That is by itself nasty and annoying. So that's why I have a problem with it, not because I don't want to see Africa. And I actually myself live close to Africa. I live right on the border of Africa, so I actually love seeing my own area from space. I don't mind it at all, but they didn't even do that, because the way they showed it, it's like the other continents didn't exist. They kind of obscured them in the clouds or something, and so it looked as if the other continents don't exist at all, that only the continent they wanted to show. So isn't that nasty by itself? Like, why do that? And so that is just so strange. So they're pushing all their agendas so hard that it's annoying, and not because I'm against those agendas, but because they do it in a stupid way, and they will basically just turn people away from it. So I think I covered everything I want to say, so let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.